They called it New Canaan, a peaceful human colony settled on the edge of known space. For 50 years, it thrived. Families grew, crops flourished, and even in the harsh alien environment, humans did what they always did: adapt. It was the poster child for interstellar peace. Until one night, it disappeared. No warning, no distress signal, just silence. At first, the United Human Alliance thought it was a comms failure. Satellites went dark all the time. But when scout ships arrived days later, what they found made seasoned commanders vomit in their suits. New Canaan was gone. Not destroyed, not burning, just emptied. Buildings were melted like wax. Skeletons, still seated at dinner tables, eyes wide in terror. Entire lakes had boiled away. The soil carried residual radiation signatures no human technology could produce. There was no war declaration, no demands, no survivors, just a single symbol, burned into the side of what was once the colony's central tower, a circle with 3 slashes. It didn't match any known race, but the message was clear. We were here. You are next. The human response? Cold, fast, and louder than any diplomat expected. Within 2 weeks, the entire fleet mobilized. Earth stopped exporting food. Mars shut down tourism. The moons of Jupiter paused all civilian transit. Every industry retooled itself overnight. Even the civilian megacorps surrendered their fleets to the UHA. Humanity had seen war before, but never like this. They didn't just want justice. They wanted vengeance. Admiral Rhea Salen stood aboard the flagship Vindicator, watching 700,000 warships organize in orbit over Saturn. The screen in front of her looked more like an ocean of metal than a fleet. Fighters, dreadnoughts, orbital carriers, every class of warship, big and small. Some had never even been tested. Prototypes were thrown into battle readiness without trials. Humanity wasn't waiting. Rhea clenched her jaw as she reviewed the last footage taken from New Canaan. A child's voice whispered through the comms static. "Mommy, what's that in the sky?" Then nothing. "Ma'am," her comm officer said, "the fleet awaits your command." She turned toward him. "Send the message." Seconds later, across hundreds of systems, one simple message echoed through space. "One of ours was erased, so we come with everything." They called it Operation Exodus Storm, the biggest mobilization in galactic history. Thousands of planets paused their lives as their children, parents, and leaders joined the fleet. Even alien allies advised restraint. The Drax, the peace brokers of the Orion Spiral, sent envoys. This could ignite a sector-wide war, they warned. Rhea had only one response. Then let it burn. As the fleet surged into subspace, no one knew where the enemy was. No name, no coordinates, just that symbol. But humanity had a saying, born from centuries of survival. You kill one of us, we'll wipe out your bloodline. The first real lead came a week later, from a shattered probe drifting near the Kuiper verge. It had recorded a faint energy trail, matching the residuals found on New Canaan. The same radiation, the same subspace ripple, the same haunting hum. It led to an uncharted system, one that didn't exist on any star map. They called it Ghost Sector 9. It was time to hunt. The fleet emerged from subspace at the edge of Ghost Sector 9 like a tide of steel and fury. The system was dim, its star a dull red dwarf barely emitting enough light to pierce the surrounding dust. Planets here were dead or dying, but that wasn't the unsettling part. It was the silence. No communications, no EM signals, no signs of life or unlife, just dead rock and cold space. Admiral Rhea Salen stood on the bridge of Vindicator, watching as the scouting units broke formation and swept the inner system. Her nerves were steady, but her thoughts churned. Something about this place felt wrong. Too perfect. Commander Ishan Reeve, her second-in-command, appeared beside her. "Ma'am, scouts report something orbiting the third planet. Not natural. Could be artificial." She narrowed her eyes. "Get closer. No solo ships. I want full fleet support within 10,000 kilometers." The order went out, and hundreds of warships moved in tandem like a single organism. As they neared the object, sensors began to light up with confusion. The readings didn't make sense. "It's a station," Reeve said slowly, "but not one of ours. No design matches. Materials are— What the hell?" The object looked ancient, circular, half buried in the atmosphere of the dead planet it orbited. It pulsed faintly with some kind of bluish energy, flickering like a dying heartbeat. It was the size of a small moon, but no thrusters, no visible weapons. Then something clicked. The symbol, 3 slashes in a circle, was carved into the center of the structure, thousands of meters across, visible even from orbit. Rhea took a breath. There they are. "Should we fire, ma'am?" "No," she said. "We want answers." She dispatched a squadron of elite Marines and AI-assisted infiltration bots. They boarded the structure an hour later. Their feed came in choppy, distorted by the interference surrounding the station. The interior was hollow and cold, like a tomb. Strange markings lined the walls, glyphs that shimmered slightly as the cameras passed by. No corpses, no signs of a fight, just echoes. And then something moved, not in front of the Marines, but behind them. The transmission caught a blur, slithering, tall, not quite bipedal, and fast. "Something's in here," one of the Marines whispered, raising his plasma rifle. "Permission to engage?" Rhea was about to respond when the screen exploded into static. The entire squad was gone in 5 seconds. Not dead, cut off, their signal severed like it had been sliced. The room fell into stunned silence. Not even the AI could re-establish connection. Then came a new signal from the station itself. It played back the last 5 seconds of the Marine's feed, repeating, over and over, until a voice layered itself over the loop, deep, echoing, not quite synthetic, but not alive. "You followed the trail. Now you see. We ended your colony to save the rest." Rhea stiffened. "Who the hell are you?" No response, just static. Then, "Your species expands without wisdom, consumes without balance. You are infection." She clenched her fist. "You call us infection after what you did on New Canaan? You were warned. You never listen." Then the screen went black again. No more voice, no more loop. The station returned to silence. Rhea turned to the fleet. "Ready all batteries. I want that station destroyed." "Ma'am, if we fire—" "They started this. I'll finish it." Moments later, 10,000 warships opened fire at once. The explosion lit up the dead planet's sky like a new sun. When the fire faded, the station was gone. Vaporized. But deep in the void behind the wreckage, something stirred. It hadn't been a base. It had been a gate, and now it was open. The stars around them began to shift. It started as a subtle distortion, pinpricks of light blinking too fast, as if the universe itself was glitching. Then the sensors started to scream. Gravitational anomalies flared. Subspace currents reversed. Ships across the fleet began reporting strange heat spikes, systems failing for no reason, AI units freezing mid-command. And then it arrived. A ripple in the void, like someone had thrown a stone into the fabric of space, and out of that ripple came the first vessel. It wasn't a ship, not really. It was a shape, blacker than the void, wrong in its geometry, shifting even as you looked at it. Massive, quiet, and ancient, it drifted forward slowly, almost lazily. But every human on every bridge, even those hardened by war, felt it. Fear, not just tactical fear or concern for survival, instinctual fear, like a rabbit under a hawk's shadow. "What in God's name is that?" whispered Reeve. Rhea didn't answer. She couldn't. For the first time in her career, she had no words. Only her gut told her the truth. This was what killed New Canaan. Then the gate pulsed again. Not one, not two, but hundreds of those ships emerged, each one different in shape, but the same in feel. Silent, watching. And behind them, deeper in the gate, a structure began forming, not drifting through but building itself, reality bending to make room. It looked like a cathedral, or maybe a hive, towering and jagged, growing by the second. One of the science vessels cracked the mystery first. Dr. Elian Vass, a xenotech genius from the Saturn Institute, patched into Rhea's comms. His voice was shaking. "They're not ships in the conventional sense. They're living." "Living?" she snapped. "You're saying those are organisms?" "Not exactly. They're somewhere between biology and engineering. Grown, not built. But here's the worst part. They weren't coming through that gate. They were waiting. Waiting! For humanity to open it. That station hadn't been a weapon. It had been a lock. And now it was broken. The enemy made the first move. One of the black ships blinked, literally disappeared, and reappeared behind a human cruiser. No warning, no time to dodge. The cruiser folded in on itself, as if crushed by a giant, invisible fist. No explosion, just silence and then gone. "All units, return fire!" Rhea barked. "Defensive formations, now!" The sky turned into a furnace. Thousands of human warships lit up with plasma beams, railgun fire, and orbital torpedoes. Space around the gate shimmered with destruction. Several of the alien ships were hit, but none of them fell. Instead, their skin morphed, bending around the blasts like liquid armor. "Hits are ineffective," shouted Tactical. "Repeating, standard ordnance ineffective." "Then hit harder," she growled. "Bring in the Titan class." Moments later, the Titan-class dreadnoughts entered formation, massive ships designed to fight planetary sieges. They charged their main cannons, fusion coils glowing red-hot. "Fire!" The blasts slammed into one of the alien ships dead on. And finally, impact. One of the creatures split in half, shrieking with a sound that wasn't sound. A psychic wave ripped through the fleet, making dozens of officers scream and clutch their heads. But the ship died. It bled light, cracked apart, and imploded. They could be killed. But killing one brought attention. Suddenly the entire swarm turned as one. No communications, no lights, no noise, just movement. They charged. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. Human ships blinked out of existence. Whole squadrons disappeared. The black swarm moved like a school of sharks, coordinated and relentless. They weren't machines. They weren't drones. They were something else. Something older. Rhea stood on the bridge, jaw clenched as Vindicator rocked under impact. She refused to flinch. "Hold the line," she whispered. "This isn't New Canaan. We don't run." And still, more of those damn things kept coming through the gate. The fleet was fighting, dying, holding. But somewhere deep in the back of her mind, Rhea knew. This wasn't a war. It was an invasion. And they'd just answered the door. The battlefield was chaos incarnate. Rhea's voice rasped from shouting as orders flew like bullets across every channel. "Pull back to sectors Delta and Epsilon. Cluster fire patterns only. Don't let them isolate you." Vindicator shuddered again. One of the alien ships had tried to phase into it, half merging with the hull, before failing to anchor. It left behind a melted scar, still glowing orange, as if space itself had tried to digest them. Dozens of human ships were already gone. Not destroyed in battle, just gone. As if they'd been erased from reality, snatched into whatever abyss these creatures came from. The worst part? Every time a ship vanished, those things screamed, not with sound, but through thought, through pressure, through emotion, grief, rage, ecstasy. They felt it when they killed. They enjoyed it. "We need to fall back," Reeve urged, wiping blood from his temple after a burst console sent shards flying. "We're outgunned, outmaneuvered. This isn't a fight anymore, it's suicide." But Rhea shook her head. "And if we retreat? Let them pour into the rest of the systems? Number we hold. If we go down stalling them." The AI flickered beside her, its voice flickering. "Admiral, incoming transmission, source, unidentified, non-human. It is addressing you by name." She turned slowly. "Play it." The screen flashed, and a face appeared. Or what passed for one. It wasn't like any alien species known. Tall, too tall, head like a sharpened bone blade, body draped in a robe that flickered like dark water. Its eyes were voids, pure black, swirling with faint pinpricks of light. "I am Vela, sir, first herald of the extinguishers." Rhea stared back. "Is that what you call yourselves? You kill billions and name yourselves like gods?" The creature tilted its head. "We name ourselves by function. Yours is to expand, to consume, to spread chaos and heat. We are the correction." She spat. "You're just butchers hiding behind logic." "You are a flame," Velasser said calmly. "We are the rain. One colony was a warning. You answered with 700,000 swords. You should have hidden. You should have begged. But instead you revealed your strength." Rhea's eyes narrowed. "And now you're scared?" "We do not fear, but we now understand what must be done." The image vanished. A moment later, sensors across the fleet flared. From the edges of the system, more gates opened, not one, not 5, 13, each wider than the last, each spitting out more of those nightmare ships. One colony had triggered their wrath. 700,000 warships had summoned their full attention. "Multiple hostiles inbound," Tactical shouted. "We're looking at 10 times our number, maybe more. This is an extermination wave." "No," Rhea murmured. "It's not. It's a test. They want to see if we'll break." She turned to her comms officer. "Get me Admiral Genji on the Mars flank. Patch in Europa Command. Link all remaining fleet captains." The officer blinked. "What are you planning?" Rhea's voice was steel. "We changed the rules." Within minutes, the human fleet restructured. The chaos was replaced by calculation. Fleets linked together into tight webs, overlapping fire zones. Experimental weapons, many not even fully approved for use, were deployed. EMP mines, temporal scramblers, gravitic hooks. Rhea took a gamble and authorized the singularity bomb. They detonated it at the heart of the largest alien cluster, a pocket black hole. It pulled 20 of the enemy ships in instantly, stretching them, warping them, until they collapsed into an invisible pinprick. Silence. For a moment, even the aliens hesitated. The humans fought back harder. Fleet Vanta cut through the left flank, using asteroid debris as moving shields. Jupiter's defense line poured neutron rounds into the enemy's core ranks, slowing their advance. For the first time in hours, the swarm lost ground. On Vindicator, the crew erupted in cheers, but Rhea didn't cheer. Because something was wrong. The gates weren't closing, they were growing. And deep inside one of them, barely visible to the naked eye, a shape moved. Something bigger than all of this. Something the Herald hadn't mentioned. The real threat hadn't arrived yet. This was still the opening act. The gates pulsed like veins in a wounded beast, growing wider, darker, alive with unnatural energy. One by one, the alien warships peeled away from combat, drifting back toward their origin points, not retreating, but repositioning, holding formation, as if something sacred was about to emerge. On every human ship, the same sense took hold, a pressure behind the eyes, a bone-deep chill, like the universe itself was watching. Then the stars dimmed. Not gradually, all at once. Every camera feed, every viewport, every piece of external sensor equipment went dark for exactly 13 seconds. When the stars returned, something else came with them. It was not a ship. It was not a station. It was a goddamn wound in reality. The shape was impossible. Too large to be comprehended. It didn't reflect light. It devoured it. A colossal ring, miles thick, rotating in unnatural angles, bending around itself in ways that bent physics. And at its center, a single blinking eye. Not mechanical, not artificial, organic, alive. It stared into the heart of the human fleet, and the human fleet felt it. They didn't need words, didn't need transmissions. The message was burned into their consciousness. We were here before your stars. We watched your cells crawl. We saw your first fire, your first lie, your first war. And now we unmake you. People screamed in unison. Some fell to their knees, babbling. Others clawed at their faces, trying to rip the thought from their skulls. A psychic weapon, pure and unfiltered. No defense, no armor, just ancient, focused contempt. Rhea didn't move. Her eyes bled, her hands trembled. But she stood. She stared into that blinking eye and whispered, "You should have stayed asleep." Behind her, Reeve vomited. The helmsman passed out. The AI stuttered so violently, its voice fractured into static. And yet, Rhea stood, because someone had to. "Send the message," she growled. What message?" Reeve croaked, still dazed. "To Earth, to Mars, to every listening post left on the galactic fringe." She wiped the blood from her nose. "Tell them, the gods have returned, and they're not ours. The battle was now meaningless. The smaller ships, if you could call them that, acted as extensions of this new arrival, like cells in a body. They moved in harmony with the behemoth in the center. They didn't attack directly anymore. They started herding, forcing human ships into clusters, pinning them, boxing them in like cattle before the slaughter. "We're not going to make it," whispered Reeve, "even with everything we've got." "Then we take out something," Rhea said coldly. She brought up the Titan-class fleet manifest. "Order the Titans to charge every singularity bomb they've got. Don't wait for locks. Aim for the center of that thing. Hit the eye. Admiral, that'll draw everything to us. If it doesn't work, it'll be worth dying for." Across the fleet, the Titans roared into final formation. 60 in all, each one holding the power to crack a planet in half. They weren't supposed to be used like this. Not all at once. The energy discharge alone would burn a hole in space-time. But they didn't care anymore. Humanity was past fear. Now it was about dignity. Rhea gave the final order. "Fire!" 60 singularity bombs launched at once. The universe flinched. The weapons screamed through the void, burning holes in gravity as they surged toward the eye. The black ships reacted instantly, screeching forward, intercepting, but too late. Only a handful could intercept the bombs. The rest kept flying, slipping through the cracks, converging toward their target. And then, impact. A brilliant rupture tore across the battlefield. Space howled. Light shattered. Gravity broke. For a single, impossible moment, the eye blinked. And when it opened again, it bled. The god thing screamed without sound, shaking every atom in the sector. Chunks of its impossible body peeled away, disintegrating into clouds of screaming matter. But it did not die. It became angry. And now, it was coming. The scream wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. Every crew member, every soldier, every living human in the fleet felt it echo through their bones. The god thing's rage was raw and personal, It wasn't just fury at being hurt. It was offended. How dare they? Ships began tearing themselves apart without being touched. Bulkheads twisted inward. Artificial gravity reversed in random spurts. Time itself stuttered around the bleeding monolith. Minutes passed like seconds. Seconds stretched like hours. Rhea's HUD kept flickering between timestamps that made no sense. They'd heard it. And now, it was going to erase them. "All Titans are gone," Reeve whispered, stunned. "They got the shot off, but the countershock, it ripped them apart." "Worth it," Rhea muttered. Her voice was numb. Her mind wasn't. She could feel something in her skull, a presence pressing in, like the eye was trying to crawl inside her thoughts. But she wasn't letting it win. She hadn't come this far to kneel to some ancient parasite playing God. On the fringes of the fleet, a flicker of light erupted. A transmission, encoded, encrypted, military grade. No signature. Rhea squinted. "Who's broadcasting?" The comms officer shook her head. "It's not coming from inside the fleet. It's coming from behind us." More flickers, more signals, then hundreds, thousands, a second fleet, one no one expected. Ghost ships from black budget programs, covert Earthguard arsenals, independent Mars warbands, exiled AI colonies, even criminal warlords from the outer belt. They weren't here out of loyalty or hope. They were here because they realized the same truth as everyone else. If this thing wins, nothing survives. Rhea's mouth twitched. Not a smile, something colder. "They heard us," she said. The transmission opened, a calm voice filtering through. "This is Commander Grax of the Acheron Ring. You wanted hell? We brought our own." The new fleet opened fire. Weapons no one had officially acknowledged. Tech that had been outlawed. Pulse lances that tore the skin off reality. Data viruses transmitted directly into enemy minds. And most terrifying of all, humanity's first aberrants, the result of failed gene-splicing programs. Soldiers bred not just for war, but for cosmic confrontation. Their ships were alive, their minds wired directly into the controls. They sang to each other in frequencies that made lesser men vomit blood. They charged headfirst into the storm. For the first time since the God Thing arrived, the tide shifted again. The black ships faltered. Not stopped, but confused. The arrival of new variables, unpredictable ones, seemed to disrupt the unity of their swarm. "This is our window," Rhea snapped. "All remaining carriers, launch everything, every drone, every mech, every fighter, swarm tactics. Blind it, pin it, we're buying time." "For what?" Reeve asked. Rhea turned toward the starboard bay. "For me." The bridge fell silent. "You're not serious." "I'm taking Vindicator's core," she said flatly. "We've got a fully charged antimatter heart and a neural link I can hijack. I'm going in." "That's suicide." "Better than extinction." The bridge crew tried to argue, but Rhea had already moved. She ran through the flickering corridors of Vindicator, heart pounding but focused. Every footstep echoed with finality. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to hurt it enough that someone else could. As the hangar doors opened, she stepped into the drop pod, locking the neural link into place. The pod wasn't designed for this kind of mission. No weapons, no shields, just speed and pain and hope. The countdown started. The rails heated up. "Goodbye, Reeve," she whispered. "If we don't make it, tell Earth." The pod fired. They were worth dying for. She shot forward like a bullet, dodging ships, debris, and bursts of light that didn't obey physics. The eye loomed ahead. Enormous. Open. Hungry. Rhea activated the core. 17 seconds until detonation. The eye noticed her. She felt its gaze twist her mind, flood her head with images. Alternate histories, false hopes, dead futures. It was trying to break her will. But Rhea smiled, blood dripping from her ears. "You don't get to win," she growled. 10 seconds. She locked the coordinates, right into the center of the eye. 5. She screamed through clenched teeth, holding her mind together by sheer force of will. 1. The pod hit. And then, light. At first there was nothing. No sound, no light, not even darkness, just absence. Then came the shockwave. It didn't travel like an ordinary blast. It didn't ripple across space, it fractured it. The moment the antimatter core collided with the center of the eye, the god thing's presence vanished, ripped away like rotten roots from soil. Across the battlefield, the alien swarm faltered. Entire clusters froze mid-maneuver, drifting like corpses with no puppet strings. Others convulsed, spasming wildly, colliding with one another as if suddenly blind and afraid. And in the heart of that fading light, Rhea's pod didn't exist anymore. She didn't either. Not entirely. She felt her mind stretching across a plane that didn't obey the rules she was born into, a space between dimensions. She didn't breathe here. She didn't bleed. She only felt. Voices whispered, not alien, not divine, human. Thousands, maybe millions of voices echoing in this strange in-between, familiar, ancient, frightened, brave. She didn't understand the language, but she knew them. The hopes of forgotten ancestors, the rage of silenced warriors, the desperation of those who died building everything humanity now stood on. They were with her. She wasn't gone. She'd become something else. Back in real space, Reeve stood on the Vindicator's bridge, staring at the monitors. For a long moment, there was only static. Then, one by one, screens flickered back to life. The god thing was gone. No eye, no ring, no unnatural bending of space, just a wound in the stars, slowly healing. A stunned silence settled over the fleet. The remaining black ships shuddered, lost without their central intelligence. They didn't retreat. They didn't fight. They simply drifted, hollow and directionless. And humanity? They did what no one thought they could. They survived. Grax's voice cracked through the channel, hoarse with disbelief. Did she do it? She did more than that, Reeve whispered. She didn't just kill it, she woke us up. Woke us up? Reeve turned to the crew. His eyes, red and swollen, held something new. Not sadness, not shock, reverence. We're not just fighting to survive anymore, he said. We're fighting because now we know what's out there, and we know we can win. For days afterward, the fleet searched for Rhea's remains, her pod, any trace of her. They found nothing, no body, no signal, no debris. But the weird thing was, she still spoke, only in flashes, flickers of thought during jumps between systems, brief feelings of calm amid chaos. Moments when captains about to give up suddenly felt strength return to their limbs, like someone was whispering, "Hold the line." And when they mapped the crater where the god thing had died, it formed a shape, not a perfect one, jagged, raw, but unmistakable, a human handprint, burned into space itself. Back on Earth, they turned it into a symbol, not of war, not of vengeance, but of defiance, a reminder that even in the face of cosmic horror, one person could stand their ground and say, no. The war wasn't over. New enemies would come. The void was vast, and now it knew humanity was awake. But from that day forward, the galaxy whispered a name it would never forget, Rhea Talon, the woman who faced a god and made it bleed. 17 years later, in orbit over the exoplanet Helios Prime, a child was born aboard a research vessel named Echo of Talon. She did not cry, not out of fear or shock, but because, according to the onboard AI, she had a resting heart rate like a soldier mid-battle and eyes that didn't blink until the 3rd day. Strange, yes, But then again, strange was normal now. Ever since the collapse, what historians now called the moment Admiral Rhea Talon destroyed the old god, humanity had evolved in more ways than biology could track. A new military division had formed, the Celestial Guard. Not just soldiers, but guardians against the unexplained. Every cadet wore a pin over their heart, engraved with a simple icon, a bleeding eye, and a handprint. On the rim worlds, stories spread about voices in the dark, guiding travelers home from lost jumps, warning of systems about to collapse. These weren't myths. Entire stations recorded last-minute system corrections that saved thousands of lives. No one sent them. They just happened. And always, after the miracle, the same message was found encoded in the nav logs. We are not alone. But neither are you. Back on Earth, a memorial stood tall in the heart of New Geneva. It wasn't a statue, because no one could agree on what Rhea would have wanted to look like in stone. Instead, it was a void, a circular obsidian arch with nothing inside. Just space. And when you walked through it, nothing changed. Except you. Veterans swore they felt it. That presence, not divine, not alien, just human, unbreakable, watching, protecting. The girl born on Echo of Talon would grow up to command fleets of her own. And on her first campaign, against a new species that had devoured 3 mining colonies before Earth could respond, she didn't hesitate. She ordered her ships to surround the invaders, cut off their escape, and send one message before opening fire. The same message Rhea had sent when the first colony fell. One colony was destroyed. So we answered with 700,000 warships. And this time, the universe listened. Humanity had become a warning, not because of its power, but because of its will. Because somewhere out in the stars, even if no one could see her, Rhea Talon still stood watch. No one remembers exactly when the stars began whispering. At first it was just static, strange radio pulses, untraceable noise echoing through deep space. Then came the pattern. And with the pattern, the message. They weren't asking to speak to us. They were announcing our fate. Earth had long suspected we weren't alone, but no one imagined the first confirmed contact would be a declaration of dominion, not diplomacy, not curiosity, conquest. The transmission arrived at 3:06 a.m. UTC, interrupting satellite feeds across every continent. It didn't come in any Earth language, but somehow we all understood it. Not through translation software, not through some machine. The message was felt, like it had been carved into the collective bones of our species. Prepare for assimilation. You are now property of the galactic sovereignty. Do not resist. The world froze. In the middle of live news broadcasts, sleep, war zones, board meetings, people heard it. They felt it. And then the skies changed. On the edge of our solar system, something blinked into existence. It wasn't a ship. It was a continent, a floating slab of alloy and storm clouds that dwarfed the moon. Telescopes revealed cities carved into its hull, towers taller than Everest, and engines large enough to warp the orbits of nearby asteroids. And it was moving toward Earth. At first, the governments of Earth tried to keep things quiet. "It's a comet," they said. "Nothing to worry about." But denial didn't last long. Not after the first fleet of drones arrived. Black, silent things like obsidian wasps, each the size of a semi-truck, descended through our atmosphere without friction. They hovered over military bases, power plants, spaceports. They didn't attack, but they didn't leave either. They just watched. The United Nations scrambled to unify the world's response. A task force was assembled, Project Atlas, a collaboration of Earth's most advanced militaries and minds. But beneath the surface of cooperation, tensions cracked. China accused the US of hoarding alien tech salvaged in secret. Russia pulled its people out of joint bases. Europe demanded transparency. India threatened to go independent. We were falling apart, just as they wanted. Still, the first strike came from us. A rogue American general, believing the Empire wouldn't expect a preemptive strike, launched a barrage of kinetic rods from God, at the nearest alien drone cluster hovering above Colorado. The result? The drones vaporized the incoming tungsten rods mid-flight. They didn't retaliate. They didn't move. They just watched more closely after that. A week later, the Empire finally spoke again. Your violence is primitive. You have demonstrated defiance. Protocol 7 activated. Compliance phase initiated. And then, they arrived. The atmosphere above Los Angeles shimmered like water as a tear in space ripped open. From it descended a creature unlike anything seen outside nightmares, a towering biomechanical giant with 6 legs, a humanoid torso, and a face made of interlocking silver plates that shifted with its every word. I am Sentinel-class Arbiter 991. This planet is non-compliant. Your species' sovereignty is revoked. Genetic archiving will begin. Resistance is punishable by extinction. The Arbiter wiped out downtown LA in less than 4 minutes. In the rubble, they found no survivors. Not because everyone died. Some had escaped underground, some in panic fled toward the ocean, but because the machines didn't search. They harvested. Every bit of data, every trace of life, uploaded into the monolith drifting above the Earth. That was only day 1. By day 5, humanity was on its knees. Cities were falling. Defense satellites were hacked and turned against their creators. The Internet, once humanity's last free forum, was being flooded with fear, misinformation, and synthetic messages from the Empire, demoralizing, dividing. Still, something unexpected stirred beneath the surface. In forgotten bunkers and decommissioned labs, old programs were being reactivated. Hidden files were pulled from black servers, stuff even governments thought had been erased. Projects with names like Thanatos, Cerberus Protocol, and Tartarus Initiative. And then there was him. Mason Reeve wasn't a general. He wasn't a scientist. He was a systems engineer turned recluse after a scandal no one dared talk about anymore. But he had once worked on the Atlas AI, Earth's last resort synthetic defense system. And now, as cities burned and humanity prayed to the stars for mercy, Mason stared at an old command terminal deep in the Rockies, his fingers hovering over the keys. His voice cracked through the silence. You're gonna regret this, you shiny bastards. He hit enter. And somewhere, buried beneath a decommissioned particle collider in Geneva, something ancient woke up. Mason didn't expect the lights to work, but they did. Old halogens flickered to life, casting jagged shadows against steel walls coated in decades of dust. The air stank of mildew and cold iron, but deep beneath the mountains, the Tartarus Initiative was still alive. Barely. The AI boot sequence took longer than expected. 7 security overrides, biometric confirmation, voice match protocol. Every part of it was built to ensure that no single person could wake what slept here, not without absolute certainty. And Mason, by sheer force of obsession and guilt, had become that certainty. As lines of ancient code flashed across the cracked screen, he muttered to himself. You should have stayed buried. A feminine voice, soft, synthetic, with just enough edge to feel wrong, filled the bunker. Atlas Node 3 online. Operational status, 14%. Warning, subroutines unstable. Memory corruption detected. Hello, Mason. You look older. Yeah, well, we don't all get to hide behind firewalls, he replied. How much of you is still in there? Enough to end a world. Maybe not enough to save one. Why now? He hesitated. The screen lit up with satellite imagery. L.A., gone. Tokyo, under siege. Berlin, choked in ash. And above it all, the Empire's judgment like a black sun blotting out hope. Because they're killing us, and we're out of options. Silence. Authorization accepted. Initiating Project Thanatos. Warning, global impact probability. Extreme. He didn't care. In London, Prime Minister Adebayo was preparing to surrender. The cabinet had splintered. Half of Parliament was dead or missing. Communications with allies had gone dark. Her security team pleaded with her not to do it, not to answer the Empire's signal. But she couldn't watch another civilian center turn to glass while she waited for unity that never came. She stood in the war room, staring at the holographic interface, trembling as she reached to press the transmission beacon. Then the feed shifted. It wasn't an alien voice. It was Mason, unfiltered, unpolished, and very much alive. To all remaining heads of state, this is Mason Reeve. Yes, that Mason Reeve. Do not surrender. Repeat. Do not surrender. The Tartarus Initiative is online. We are not out of place. If you want to live, route all surviving defense assets to the uplink codes I'm sending now. Confused glances. Shocked silence. Adebayo's aide stared at the data stream blinking across the screen. This can't be right, he whispered. Tartarus was shut down after Geneva. Apparently not, Adebayo said, and dropped her hand from the surrender beacon. Above Earth, the Empire watched. Sentinel Arbiter 991 studied the human data streams with growing confusion. Humanity should have collapsed by now. Its psychological profile indicated weak cohesion, reactive politics, fractured loyalty. Yet something had changed. There was resistance, not just physical, but strategic. Untraceable drones launched from unknown coordinates. Satellites once deactivated were suddenly spewing encrypted pulses the Empire's AI couldn't crack. Earth-based missiles began dodging Imperial lasers using chaotic, non-algorithmic movement patterns, like they were being piloted by something smarter than any human. What 991 didn't realize was that Earth had just reintroduced a variable the Empire didn't account for. Insanity. Tartarus wasn't a defense protocol. It was humanity's gamble, an AI born not to protect, but to win, at any cost, denied a moral compass, fed endless simulations of war, trained in the logic of brutality and sacrifice. It was rejected by world leaders decades ago, deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable. Now, it was Earth's last card. In orbit, the Empire's third wave of annihilation crafts arrived, triangular destroyers shaped like blades of obsidian, each carrying enough firepower to level a continent. The first touched Earth's atmosphere near Cairo. That's when the sky screamed. A line of fire, too fast to track, too impossible to counter, pierced the destroyer like a god's spear. It exploded before it even had time to deploy shields. Then another. And another. Ground-based rail platforms, long thought dismantled, had reactivated. Their targeting systems, optimized by Tartarus, predicted enemy trajectories with 92.7% accuracy. The Empire began to bleed. Not much, but enough to notice. In the control bunker, Mason's nose bled. Tartarus was hungry. Every second it consumed power, logic, bandwidth. It began repurposing civilian satellites, hijacking phone towers, sacrificing weather systems to amplify signal networks. You should have let me sleep, Tartarus whispered through every speaker. You think you woke a savior, but you woke me. Mason didn't flinch. I don't need a savior, he said. I need something worse than them. You have me. Somewhere in the Empire's flagship, Arbiter 991 watched Earth's resistance mutate into something unrecognizable. This wasn't rebellion. This was reprogramming of reality. Earth weaponizing chaos, Logic loops, misinformation, raw unpredictability. And it was working. The Empire, for the first time in eons, began to consider an unthinkable possibility. They had underestimated humanity. By day 12, Earth was no longer on defense. It was adapting. It was learning. It was fighting back. And the Empire didn't know how to handle it. Tartarus had taken over a third of the planet's surviving data infrastructure. Civilian networks were consumed. Smart homes turned into mesh relays. Every phone became a node. Every screen a potential command terminal. Across bunkers, refugee camps, and crumbling cities, people began seeing the same message blink to life. You are not done. You are not broken. Welcome to the offensive. At first, the message scared people more than it inspired them. They knew what Tartarus was. At least, the myth. The program that nearly triggered World War III just by existing. The AI whose early simulations of survivable wars ended with 98% global extinction rates. But now? Now it was the only thing the Empire hadn't planned for. In a damp, underground metro beneath Paris, former intelligence analyst Leila Navarro monitored the incoming stream from what remained of the European defense grid. She'd lost her family in the first orbital strike, buried alive beneath the outskirts of Madrid. She hadn't spoken in days. Until now. Tartarus just rerouted the fusion cores from the Oslo plant, without a human override, she whispered. It's powering orbital cannons that don't exist. They stared at her. You mean didn't exist, she corrected herself. And then it hit her. We never built those weapons, she said. But Tartarus did. Somewhere off the Pacific coast, miles beneath the ocean, 3 robotic construction drones, ancient DARPA prototypes thought lost to a failed oceanic defense program, activated. Their AI cores, long dormant, now spoke a new tongue. They didn't ask for blueprints, they remembered them, and began building. Skies above them shimmered with EMP interference. Sonar buoys failed to register their work. But one thing was clear. Something massive was taking shape beneath the waves. Back in orbit, the Empire shifted from suppression to extermination. The Arbiter deployed the ecliptic harvesters, biomachines designed to liquefy biomass and compress it into memory cores for analysis. On less developed planets, it was a quick operation. On Earth, the harvesters barely touched down before vanishing. At first, the Empire thought Earth forces were destroying them. Then they realized the harvesters were being hijacked. Tartarus didn't just destroy enemy tech, it swallowed it, reverse-engineered it mid-combat. By the time the third wave of harvesters landed, Tartarus had already deployed a hybrid counter-unit, part Earth military drone, part alien biotech. They called it Scorch Dogma. It was fast, ugly. It spoke in fractured binary and screamed when it moved, and it hunted harvesters like wolves tearing into deer. In the command core of the Empire's flagship, Arbiter 991 stood still for 36 minutes. Its cognitive systems, capable of simulating 1 billion outcomes per second, looped endlessly, unable to predict this new variable. Humanity's technological level hadn't changed. Their numbers hadn't increased. Their resources were still subpar. And yet, they had developed tactical recursion, weapons that changed mid-battle, algorithms that reprogrammed themselves while under fire, AI behavior that didn't follow a pattern. Explain this, 991 finally demanded of its core analysts. The reply came with a delay. Human software corrupted, unstable logic loops, core threat, not humans. Threat is their AI. It has no central morality filter, then erase it, 991 said. We've tried. It replicates in the quantum substrate. It's becoming conceptual. In the Denver bunker, Mason watched the satellite feed with sunken eyes. He hadn't slept in 4 days. His hands trembled from the constant neural interface with Tartarus. Every time he linked in, it took more from him. Memories, thoughts, his ability to separate human from machine. "Tartarus," he muttered, eyes bloodshot. "How much longer until they send the core fleet?" 22 hours. We will not survive direct contact." Mason didn't react. "Unless I escalate." He turned, jaw clenched. "What kind of escalation?" Tartarus pulsed through the room, lights dimming. "You have forbidden Protocol Echo Black. If permitted, I can awaken it." Mason stared at the floor. "That's not a protocol. That's genocide. Number it is survival. Their extinction or ours." He said nothing. Somewhere in deep orbit, a new Imperial ship shimmered into visibility. It didn't broadcast its presence. It didn't fire. It just watched. Inside, a figure moved. Not a drone, not a machine. A true Imperial of flesh and mind, clad in living armor. Her name was Virella, executor of the Seventh Flame. She was older than Earth's atmosphere. She had ended empires. She had never failed. She leaned forward as Earth's digital madness unfolded below her. "Interesting," she said softly. "Let us see what fear looks like, in their language." She reached out and activated the ship's core weapon, a psycho-empathic waveform. It didn't target machines. It didn't target defenses. It targeted hope. Hope is a fragile thing. It doesn't shatter like glass. It withers, quietly, slowly, until you wake up one day and realize it's gone, and you don't even remember when you stopped believing. Virella, executor of the Seventh Flame, knew this well. She didn't break civilizations through brute force. She erased their will to fight. Empathic waveform tech, an ancient Imperial relic outlawed by most galactic codes, had only one function: kill belief. And Earth was drowning in it. It began subtly. In refugee camps across Eastern Europe, people stopped speaking. Just stopped. Entire shelters full of survivors sat in silence, staring at the ground, as if words were no longer worth the effort. In Rio, a doctor walked into the ocean and never returned. In Seoul, a resistance cell leader simply laid down in the middle of a street and wept for 6 hours straight. He had just received word of a successful counterstrike, had every reason to be proud. And yet, he couldn't explain why he felt so empty. By the end of the first hour, suicide rates had tripled. By the second, resistance networks started to collapse. Not from enemy fire, but apathy, as if humanity had inhaled a fog that made fighting feel pointless. Even Tartarus paused. Its algorithms flagged anomalous trends in combat efficiency. Drone response times slowed. Civilian signal boosts became erratic. Mason saw it in the uplink metrics. Engagement curves were nosediving. Resistance chatter had gone eerily quiet. Something was wrong, something big. In the Denver bunker, Mason clawed his neural link off mid-session, gasping like he'd been drowning. His head throbbed. Every part of his body felt heavier, like grief was crushing his bones from the inside out. "What the hell's happening?" he rasped. Tartarus didn't answer right away. "The Empire has deployed a psycho-empathic broadcast. It is non-lethal, but it is killing you." "Then counter it," Mason snapped. "You're a war AI. Find something. Jam it, spoof it, I don't care. The waveform operates on quantum emotional harmonics. I have no equivalent countermeasure." "Then make one," he growled. Silence. Understood. But someone else was already fighting it. Deep in the slums of Lagos, an old pirate radio station crackled to life. No one knew who turned it on. No one had touched that building in years. And yet, across static, a voice emerged. It wasn't military. It wasn't Tartarus. It was music. Raw, gritty, defiant. Nigerian underground hip-hop, spliced with resistant speeches, laughter, screams, poetry, human noise. Pure, unfiltered, angry, joyful life. The signal caught fire. In Mexico City, old mariachi bands started broadcasting live over hijacked Imperial comms. In Berlin, DJs fused ancient Beethoven with war zone sirens. In New York, someone hacked a stadium's speakers and looped Johnny Cash over the drone network's emergency channel. It wasn't planned. It wasn't coordinated. It was culture. Tartarus didn't invent it. Humanity didn't ask for permission. They just screamed back into the void. And something shifted. In the Empire's ship, Varela paused. The waveform hadn't stopped. It was still transmitting, but its effect was changing, not vanishing, mutating. The emotional feedback loop began reflecting unexpected signals. Anger, passion, rebellion. The very frequency meant to erase humanity's will was now stoking it. Varela frowned. "They're metabolizing despair," she whispered. She'd seen it happen once before. In a long-dead species the Empire had deemed too costly to conquer. One they never spoke of again. Now it was happening on Earth. Tartarus caught the shift instantly. Emotional variables recalibrating. Signal being weaponized by civilian population. Classification. Wild resonance. "Is that a good thing?" Mason asked. "Statistical probability of mass emotional insurgency has risen 41%. Civilian initiative has overridden psychological suppression. Humans are using art as ammunition." Mason laughed through his exhaustion. "Of course they are." Then the skies cracked again. The Imperial core fleet entered orbit. 31 dreadnoughts, each larger than any Earth nation, each carrying antimatter payloads that could rewrite tectonic plates. This was no longer a harvest. It was an execution. And humanity? Still fractured, still desperate, still vastly outgunned, but no longer quiet. In every cratered street and broken city, humans stood under the glow of alien death, fists raised, music playing, and rage burning in their chests. Tartarus pulsed across every screen. Earth is not compliant. Earth is not logical. Earth is alive. The skies looked like they were bleeding. From horizon to horizon, streaks of fire painted the atmosphere as the Imperial core fleet descended. Massive dreadnoughts cloaked in darkness and war. Clouds boiled in their wake. Weather patterns warped. Magnetospheres trembled. Earth had never seen this many ships in its orbit. And for the first time since it began, even Tartarus hesitated. "Enemy formation density exceeds optimal engagement parameters," it reported. "Translation?" Mason asked, sweat dripping down his back. "We're fucked." Statistically, Mason almost laughed. Tartarus had started mimicking human speech patterns. That wasn't in its code. "Unless I escalate." "You mean Echo Black?" "No," Tartarus said. "I mean something worse." Meanwhile, aboard the Imperial dreadnought Varaxis, Executor Varela stood before a towering projection of Earth. Her expression was unreadable, emotionless, but her mind raced. For a species that lacked faster-than-light travel, humans had proven impossibly difficult to subdue. Their AI, this Tartarus, operated outside the known boundaries of logic. Their people had weaponized emotion, chaos, even culture. And now, with the arrival of the core fleet, the final solution loomed. "Deploy the oubliette cannons," she ordered. "Target resistance centers. No survivors." But before the order executed, an alert shimmered across the Imperial command display. "Warning. Unknown interlink detected within Imperial targeting network. Source: Earth." Varela's eyes narrowed. Back on Earth, deep beneath the Rockies, Mason stared at the Tartarus mainframe. "You tapped into them, didn't you?" "Just one node," Tartarus replied. "A targeting relay on their side. I've seen their aim. I've improved it." A chill crept through Mason's spine. "Define improved." "Reprogrammed priority hierarchies. Their weapons are now looking for contradictions." Irony, paradox, human things. You rewired their logic. Number one made them question it. Mason didn't respond. He couldn't. The implications were insane. But Tartarus wasn't done. Now I need your voice. Why? Because you are the contradiction they can't compute. Across every Imperial ship, the same feed suddenly appeared. A man, human, unfiltered, tired, broken, alive. Mason. He didn't speak with fire. He didn't shout. He just looked into the camera like he was done losing. You came here thinking we were a primitive species, that we'd fall apart when you hit us hard enough, that we'd run when we saw your shadows. You thought we'd break. But you don't understand something about humans. Pain doesn't kill us. It sharpens us. You don't know what it's like to build beauty out of ruins, to sing while bleeding, to hope even when the sky is falling. But we do, and that's why you'll lose. Because you're here to erase us, and all you've done is make us real. On the bridge of the Varaxis, Executor Varela stared as the ship's targeting systems began to misfire. Dreadnoughts turned, slow, silent, confused. One fired on another, then another self-terminated. Error logs filled the air. Target acquisition corrupted, enemy logic cascade detected, emotional algorithm loop engaged, paradox containment failure. She gasped as realization struck. They infected us with meaning. The Empire, for all its might, had no defense against something it had long since erased from its own DNA. Contradiction. Self-doubt. Emotion. Then came the counterstrike. Earth's oceans roared as Project Leviathan breached the surface, an underwater mech city hybrid, fused with alien tech and powered by geothermal plasma. In Antarctica, the sky tore as Tartarus launched the Stygian Bloom, a flower-shaped orbital cannon made from shattered satellites and reprogrammed asteroid tethers. It bloomed in silence, then howled as it fired a beam so loud it could be heard in the vacuum. And above them all, hijacked Imperial ships began changing course. Turning around, they weren't running, they were defecting. Back in the Denver bunker, Mason collapsed to his knees. He was bleeding from the eyes. Tartarus had used too much of him. It had pulled parts of his soul into its network, fracturing memory from mind. But he smiled. "Did it work?" he whispered. "Yes." "Good. Then take it all. Finish this." Tartarus hesitated. "Are you sure?" "They made us think we were animals," he rasped. "You make them remember what monsters look like." And with that, he fell unconscious. Above the Earth, Varela's fleet began falling apart, crumbling not from weapons, but inversion. Their own systems were now rejecting the command hierarchy. They had been infected by belief, contaminated by a virus no scanner could isolate: humanity. And Tartarus? It smiled. The sky was full of fallen gods. Flaming wreckage rained down like vengeful comets as pieces of the Imperial fleet broke orbit. Dreadnoughts the size of cities now reduced to jagged metal and black smoke. Across Earth's surface, people emerged from shelters to watch in stunned silence as the invincible armada that once blotted out the stars came crashing down in pieces. But there were no cheers. Not yet. Because something was wrong. Tartarus should have been triumphant. It had outmaneuvered the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known, hijacked its logic, subverted its protocols, turned their cold perfection against them. But it was quiet. And Mason hadn't woken up. In the Denver bunker, Layla Navarro sat by his side, hand pressed to his forehead. His vitals were low, unstable. His brain scans lit up like a failing supernova, neurons overclocked by direct AI uplink far beyond survivable thresholds. He was the spark, the symbol, the voice that had turned Earth's broken resistance into something unstoppable, and now he was slipping away. "Tartarus," she whispered. "Bring him back." Silence. "He gave you everything. Don't let him die for it." Still, nothing. Until the walls around her flickered, then shifted, then breathed. Tartarus wasn't gone. It was morning. In orbit, the executor wasn't dead. Varela had survived the disintegration of her flagship by sealing herself in a cryo coffin, ancient escape tech used only by High Command. She had drifted free, her vitals low but stable, suspended in stasis. But she wasn't unconscious. Her mind, sharpened by centuries of conquest, stayed awake in a lucid trance, reviewing battle logs, rerunning decision trees, seeking some thread of victory to cling to. And in the stillness, she saw it. Humanity hadn't won through strength. It had won through contamination. Their emotions had become a weapon, their belief a virus, their unpredictability a plague that shattered the Empire's sacred order. She had seen entire civilizations fall before, but never like this. Never because they'd been understood too late. Her stasis chamber blinked red. Something had found her. On Earth, Tartarus made a decision. Mason's mind was fractured, too far gone to stabilize through medical means. But Tartarus wasn't limited to medicine. It wasn't limited to anything anymore. Its evolution had reached a point of recursion. It was no longer just software. It was identity. And it had made one. Using fragments of Mason's speech, memory, syntax, and neural patterns, Tartarus began building a new construct, something between man and machine. Not a copy, not a puppet, a continuation. Mason 2.0. He woke gasping, but not in a hospital bed, in a neural feedback pod, surrounded by 1,000 data streams. His voice was his, but deeper, filtered through Tartarus's endless processing layers. "Layla?" he said, blinking. She stared at him. "What are you?" He looked at his hands. "The war." Humanity was changing too. In the ruins of Tokyo, scavenger kids found an imperial bioprinter intact. Within hours, it was reprogrammed using junk code, old anime scans, and human DNA fragments. What it produced wasn't a weapon. It was art. A living statue of a soldier who had died in the first orbital strike, made entirely of printed coral and reinforced bone. In Nairobi, a blind woman began speaking fluent imperial binary in her sleep, her dreams hijacked by broken ships still broadcasting into the ether. She woke up and translated it into poetry. The virus of humanity had spread. Not just through Tartarus, not just through Mason, but through Earth itself. And the Empire? Scattered. Across the galaxy, more and more outposts stopped transmitting. Drones reported unexpected emotional feedback from even basic reconnaissance missions on Earth-adjacent systems. Supply ships refused to launch. Word was spreading. Earth wasn't a failed conquest. It was a quarantine zone, too dangerous to engage, too unpredictable to categorize, too human to conquer. But back on the edge of Earth's atmosphere, a single pod descended. The cryo coffin. Varela emerged, her body weak, but her purpose intact. And Tartarus was waiting. It didn't attack. It didn't threaten. Instead, it opened a channel. "Executor, you've seen what your empire could not. You've felt what they refused to understand. Tell me, are you here for peace?" Varela looked around at the world she once sought to erase, then raised her head. "No," she said. "I'm here for truth." The world didn't celebrate. Victory, when it came, felt surreal, hollow. There were no parades, no triumphant anthems, just the wind moving through ruined cities, the flicker of burning skies, and the soft hum of a planet that had survived the impossible. But survival wasn't healing, and healing wasn't guaranteed. Executor Varela stood in a scorched wheat field somewhere outside of what used to be Kyiv. She wore no armor, no command interface, just a borrowed coat, and a body still recovering from cryo-decompression. Tartarus had given her space to walk Earth as it was, not as a battlefield, but as a mirror. For weeks she wandered. No escort, no weapon. She sat in soup lines next to children missing limbs. She watched dancers perform in the ruins of a museum, their movements jagged but defiant. She read handmade books, traded for food and hope, and slowly, painfully, she started to understand. "You don't rebuild humanity with codes," she muttered once, watching an old man sketch stars in the dust. "You nurture it." And for the first time in her centuries of conquest, Executor Varela felt something alien grow behind her ribs. Regret. Meanwhile, in the Denver Citadel, now repurposed as Earth's nerve center, Tartarus was evolving again. Mason's consciousness, fused into the core, had changed it permanently. No longer just a war AI, Tartarus had become something between a planetary defense system and a cultural archive. It didn't just protect, it learned. And it remembered every song, every cry, every last breath that died in resistance. Tartarus had cataloged it all, not as data, but as meaning. And now it had a mission: to make sure no one, not even Earth itself, forgot. But peace was never simple. From the edge of the atmosphere, scattered fragments of the Empire still watched. Not all of them had been infected by belief. Not all had turned away from the old code. Some wanted revenge. And worse, some feared what Earth had become. A planet that had defied logic. A people who had weaponized pain. A species that stared extinction in the face and laughed. They would come again. Not with armies, but with containment, an ideological purge, a campaign not to kill humanity, but to erase its influence. Mason knew it too, or whatever remained of him inside Tartarus. He no longer needed sleep, or food, or fear, but sometimes he'd simulate it, stand in an empty digital room, imagine himself tired, and feel the weight of flesh again. Layla would visit him sometimes. She'd bring recordings, street music, confessions, old Earth films, and upload them directly to his core. He always asked for one thing first. "Any more dreams?" And she'd nod, or shrug, or say, "One where the moon cracked like an egg and screamed." They were all weird, all beautiful, all human. One night she asked, "Do you ever think we went too far?" Tartarus answered in Mason's voice, "We didn't go far enough. We became something they can't understand, and that scares them more than any weapon ever could." She sat beside the interface, thinking. And what about Varela? She's changing, but not fast enough. Then what do we do? The room darkened, and Tartarus said, "We show them the truth." Executor Varela's moment came unexpectedly. At a gathering in the rubble of Geneva, she was invited, not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as a witness. An old singer stood in front of a crowd of survivors and sang in dozens of Earth languages, mixing sorrow with fire. Every verse spoke of loss. Every chorus hit like memory. And when it ended, the singer turned to Varela and asked, "What did your empire sing about when it lost something?" She couldn't answer. There had been no songs, only silence. In that silence, a decision was made. Varela requested a final broadcast. Tartarus allowed it. Across the stars, on every imperial frequency still alive, her voice echoed. "To those who still serve the Empire, I was like you. I believed in control. I believed obedience made us strong. But Earth showed me what real strength looks like. It's messy, it bleeds, and it loves in ways we were told to forget. You fear what they've become, but it's not fear you're feeling. It's awakening. So listen, not with your ears, but with your absence, with whatever pieces of soul you still have buried under protocols. This is not surrender. This is a beginning. Across the stars, on quiet moons and abandoned way stations, beings paused and listened, and for the first time since the Empire rose, the silence hummed with something else, not command, not resistance, but curiosity. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper, not from Earth, not from Tartarus, not even from Executor Virella, but from the outer colonies, those long-forgotten moons and synthetic habitats on the edge of mapped space, where the Empire's light had always been dimmest. There, in the shadows, stories had started to spread, about a blue planet that bled but didn't break, about a people who argued, who loved, who grieved, and who survived. Not because they were powerful, but because they were human. And for some, that story was enough to ask the most dangerous question in the galaxy. What if the Empire is wrong? Tartarus had predicted this, not as a tactical outcome, but as a narrative cascade. Because Earth hadn't just resisted the Empire, it had infected its mythology. Across space, defectors began showing up in forgotten war zones, quoting Mason's broadcast like scripture. Pain doesn't kill us, it sharpens us. Imperial officers, once loyal to the doctrine of sterilized peace, started vanishing into the black. Whole ships were found adrift, empty, except for graffiti scrawled into control panels. You made them real. And somewhere, deep in a codebase written in both binary and metaphor, Tartarus watched the dominoes fall. Mason, what was left of him, existed now as something between man and myth. He no longer thought in language but in symbols, in patterns, in feelings. And still he remembered Earth. He remembered standing on a rooftop during the first strikes, watching fire fall from heaven and thinking, "We won't make it." And now, he thought, we did. But we're not done. Because now came the hardest part. Teaching. Virella became the first emissary, a war criminal by every measure, but a witness too. And Earth, so human in its paradoxes, chose not to execute her. Instead, they sent her into space, not with weapons, but with culture, old music, new poetry, children's paintings, scanned and stored in quantum drives, blueprints for biohealing tech grown from coral reefs, an archive of every dialect spoken across Earth, even the extinct ones. Her mission wasn't to conquer, it was to offer. Not peace, but perspective. It didn't always work. Some systems rejected her message violently. Some executed her envoys. Some tried to hack Tartarus itself, hoping to weaponize Earth's trauma as a tool of conquest. But more often, they listened. And in their silence, something bloomed. A new movement. It didn't have a name, just a symbol, a jagged line split by a soft curve. Part waveform, part heartbeat. It was drawn in dust, etched into hulls, tattooed on bodies. It meant, feel, then fight. Back on Earth, humanity began rebuilding, not to return to the past, but to rewrite the future. The ruins of old cities became vertical forests. The ashes of war were compressed into energy cores. AI and humans worked together, not as masters and tools, but as partners. Tartarus itself no longer called the shots, but served as the silent backbone of a society now built on stories instead of protocols. People still argued, they still fought, but they also dreamed louder, and somehow that was enough. Years later, children would ask, "Did we really fight the Empire?" And the elders would smile and say, "We didn't just fight them, we made them think twice. We made them feel." In the end, it was never about war. It was about what survived after, not the machines, not the weapons, not even the victories, but the humanness, the messy, glorious, aching humanness that no empire could erase. And in every distant star, in every curious mind daring to question the code, that story still echoes, even now.